Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life. Me, Mr. Shelton. I do hope that you are doing well. I'm sure that you are. We got an interesting one here today. Are we a secular or a religious culture? Okay, so as a country, are we secular or are we religious? Secular means non-religious, and religious means religious, for example. I know this is something that comes up in themes quite a lot, but it's something that I want to investigate with us today. Just see if you can try and work out a little bit from those pictures. I particularly find the one at the bottom right quite interesting. That's the picture of the House of Lords, and you can see there's some bishops sat there, and the bishops are very, very involved with the way that laws are made in this country. So in some ways, we're not very religious at all, hence why you can have quite buses with "there's probably no God now, stop worrying about life and enjoy yourself." But there's also a lot of religion endemic within what we do. So what I'd like you to do is to grab your pen and paper, because here's our cheesy intro sequence. So our title today is "What is Mission and Evangelism?" What's mission and evangelism? So we're going to explore the difference between mission and evangelism today. So do make sure you get that title written down, and as always, do pause me and unpause me whenever you're ready. It's your lesson. You can do it at the speed that you find comfortable. So it's going to be good if you can explain what mission and evangelism is. It's going to be great if you can explain why mission and evangelism is important to Christians, and even better if you can evaluate if Christians should really try and convert others or just serve the local community. So during today's session then, we've got to have a little mix and match activity. There'll be a media clip. You're going to look at some documents, a worksheet, and then we're going to do a quick exam question as well. But let's just start off with these two terms. Which word means which? What does mission mean, and what does evangelism mean? It's important that you know the definition of both of them. I'll give you a clue. I've not tricked you on this one. They are in fact the order that they're in. So mission is to help someone because you are a Christian and you want to show God's love. So there's a lot of Christians that are missionaries that go overseas, that go to other countries, and they do so to help build schools or hospitals or just sort of basic helping out. And they would be called missionaries because they're there to show God's love. Evangelism is to try and tell others about your faith, trying to convert them as well. So do make sure you've got the definition of both of those terms down. Now I find this statistic really interesting because in a lot of ways people say, oh, Christianity is a shrinking religion. Lots of people now aren't Christians that were Christians, and I can see that argument. And then you come across data that looks like this. Now what this is the percentage change of attendance in denominations from 2013 to 2020. So it's a fairly recent statistic. And what you've got here is that yes, there are certainly, Anglican being Church of England, Baptist, Catholic, Methodist, Presbyterian, there is a massive drop-off of denominations of people that attend those denominations. But on the flip side of that, you've got a massive increase. 50% more people go to Fresh Expressions than what they did in 2013. Now, Fresh Expressions is basically just a modern movement for trying to say we need to update church. So, for example, Cafe Church, which is where people meet in coffee shops, or used to pre-pandemic, or do Messy Church, which is where they have children come along and there's loads of hands-on activities. There's a massive increase of people who have been involved with that. Pentecostal being more free church, and we've talked about that in our worship session. If you aren't sure about that, you need to flip back and watch that. Orthodox is quite an interesting increase actually there, because that's quite a strict faith, and then you've got smaller denominations, you've got new churches, independents, and that's where the growth seems to be. It's more the traditional setup that there is that drop off, and that's quite often where the media pick this up from. So it is really fair to say that there is a massive change within church denominations. But what you've got with that is you've got this idea that it's probably the more up-to-date independent type denominations that are growing. So I just wanted to paint that picture because evangelism and mission is taking place in the UK. The church is actually growing, even though that isn't always the way it is presented. So why do Christians feel the need to evangelize? Okay, what I'd like you to do is I do a little mind map. Need to evangelize, you could write in the middle or something like that, or you can do a bullet point list. I'm going to play you a clip, and I'd like you to write down some of the reasons that come from this as to why Christians feel they need to evangelize. So let's watch this now.
As Christians, when people bring up the topic of evangelism, what do you think that means? Well, in my experience, people usually end up in one of two camps. Camp 1 says you need to talk about Jesus and live a life that's consistent with what you believe, and Camp 2 says all you have to do is live a good life. It'll speak for itself. Well, first of all, it's a big jump to assume that anyone can live a good life, don't you think? I mean, Romans 3:10 through 11 says, none is righteous, no, not one, no one does good, not even one. But that doesn't convince you. In Mark 10, a man comes up to Jesus and kneels down before him and says, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus responds promptly with, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. Now, not only was Jesus subtly claiming to be God here, he's making it pretty clear that nobody is good except for him, hence the no one is good part. But this is the sideshow to the main event, folks, so step right up and let's get down to it. And let's assume when Camp 2 says good life, they just mean if you live a visible, godly life, people will, just by watching you, understand all they need to know about God. Okay, let's play that out, shall we? And let's ask Bruce if he can help us. Hey, Bruce, hey. So Bruce grabs a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness, and a Christian, and he tells you to follow each of those folks around, and after simply watching them, you'll know all you need to know about God. Now, each goes to a place every week and sits among like-minded folks. Each person prays, each treats you with respect, each loves his family, is honest with his money, and is basically a nice person. So, which God do you pick based on just watching them? Who's right? How do you know? What do you compare unless they tell you why they do what they do? Talking, it seems, becomes critical. No doubt nature reveals much about the invisible attributes of God, but how do you know exactly what he requires of you? I mean, who he really is and what his ultimate plan is without some kind of specific revelation from him? I mean, how would you know if your mother wanted you to paint the left wall of the garage red if it wasn't specifically communicated to you in some way, usually by writing a note or speaking to you? So, what did God deem the best way to communicate the specifics of his will? Did he summon porpoises to do a modern dance? Did he draw word pictures in the clouds? No. To communicate precisely the things he wanted you to know, he intervened throughout history and spoke through men, ultimately moving some of them to write the Bible. That is, he spoke and he wrote a note. How would we know if God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, that Adam and Eve were created in a perfect world, but their rebellion brought sin and death into the world, that it's the grace of God through faith in Jesus alone that saves us? How would you know that Jesus died on the cross and resurrected from the grave? How would you know any detail about God and his word and his plan if nobody told us? Well, we wouldn't. We couldn't. And that's why you got to tell people things. You just can't hope people will catch on by watching you live a so-called good life. It's just not enough. Ultimately, you got to tell them why you live that way. But don't just take my word for it, my inquiring Berean band of misfits. Read along in Romans 10. And how can they know who to trust if they haven't heard of the one who can be trusted? And how can they hear if nobody tells them? Jesus himself definitively declares in Matthew 28, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. It's kind of hard to baptize in the name of somebody without actually saying the name, and it's pretty difficult to teach people to observe commandments without telling them what those commandments are, right? I mean, I could go on until my mouth falls off, but suffice to say, Christians are commanded to live a life worthy of the calling, which irrefutably includes things like giving reasons and answers for our hope and engaging in a conversation about Christ. So this idea that you never have to speak out about your faith and all you have to do is live a good life and people will catch on has been debunked. Adios.
Okay, so the next thing then, what we're going to do is, the description below is going to be your friend for the next part of this lesson. You will find a table of for and against arguments. What I'd like you to do is to go through those, identify which of those arguments for sharing faith with others and which of those are arguments against sharing faith with others. If you want to write them down, you can write them down, or if you'd rather just annotate on those, do so. So pause me now while you do that, and then come back to me. Okay, so let's just see if you've got those right. So it's only through the sharing of faith that some people get to hear God's message. That's an argument for evangelism. It's interesting to learn about other people's faith. It allows people to become more tolerant. That's also for evangelism, for sharing faith. Jesus told his disciples to tell others about him. That's also for. it helps people from different religions get along better. In terms of evangelism, that's probably not a good call, but it is in terms of sharing faith with others, so that would be a 4. Faith is a personal thing, should not be dealt with in public. That would be an argument against. If someone wants to find out more about religion, they can find out for themselves. So that would be an argument against, because that's saying that people could independently look into it. They don't have to have other people tell them. It's not fair to force religion on people who may be happy with their own beliefs. So that's an argument against. Faith's an important part of a believer's life, and you should feel honoured that they want to share it with you. That's an argument for. Sharing beliefs is part of human nature. That's an argument for. And it can be intimidating if someone you don't know stops and tells you about their religion. That'll be an argument against. I wonder how many of those you got right. The next thing then we're going to do is there's 2 tasks here to be working on. The task on the left, there's a grid for you to look at. This is taken from a document the Pope put together, and all I'd like to do, because it is quite wordy, so I'd like to try and reduce each paragraph that I've done, each extract, into just one word. So you might, for example, have service, or you might have, for example, social justice or good news. So EG stands for Evangelium Gaudium. Forgive me if I've not pronounced that right. And you'll see words at the bottom there that you could use. So the idea is that you take one of those words and you match it to the paragraph that he's written about. Just see if you come up with that. The other thing I'd like to do is there is a worksheet as well in that description that has got quite a number of questions on it. It's got 9 questions on it, and that goes through things like messy church. I'd like you to look at that and answer those questions in as much detail as you can as well. So pause me now. Give yourself, I don't know, probably about half an hour to do that. I do have a 12-minute question to end this lesson with, so make sure you give me enough time to come back to that. So pause me now and I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so we said a good outcome would be if you could explain what mission and evangelism is, and hopefully we've done that really well now. Great if you can explain why it's important to Christians, and we've covered that with our table, and even better if you can evaluate if Christians should try to convert others or just serve local communities, and that's kind of where we're going with this question. So it's a 12 marker, it's a part 5 question, so you've got 12 minutes to do it. As I talked about previously, I suggest you use farm, for, against, rebuttal, my opinion, and using as many quotes as you can, or source of authority. So something like Messy Church or Evangelii Gaudium, those are sources of authority that you could use. Even saying Pope Francis said would be a source of authority for this. Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be a direct lots and lots of arguments for and against it. You can just come up with more than one viewpoint on this. That's absolutely fine, but you've got to justify it in different ways. Do try and use different sources of authority. So try and come up with why you think Christians should try to serve others. Try and come up with reasons why Christians maybe shouldn't try and serve others, they should try and convert. And then you come up with a rebuttal, a third point of view as well. So it's going to try and use some evidence, as I've said to you, and come up with a conclusion. 12 minutes, give yourself a go, leave yourself a couple of minutes at the end of the lesson, come back to me. Okay, so this is then how it is marked. For 0 marks you've written nothing, which I'm sure you've not done. For 1 to 3 marks you've simply written I think that, and that's about as far as you've gone. 4 to 6 marks you've not referenced any religion in there, you've just talked about why you think religion should try and convert other people, but not talked about Christianity or Church of England, Roman Catholic or the Pope or anything like that. For 7 to 9 mark you've used religion clearly, and you've used logical chain of reasoning, so you've done for and against and my opinion. And then for 10 to 12 marks you've applied religion to it, you've used quotes or source of authority, like for example the Pope, or what the church teaches, or what Jesus teaches about go therefore and baptize people in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Always a good one to quote there. I'll say that again, go therefore and baptize people in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit, part of our God jitters, and it's a well-reasoned argument as well. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of this. Next time we'll look at Eucharist, part of the sacraments, coming back to that, and then we've just got a few more lessons to go before the end of this unit. So I'm going to leave that there for the day. Thanks for your time. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. Wash hands. God bless you. And I'll be seeing you soon.